everyone, my name is Sam and thanks for checking out this video. Make sure to hit the subscribe button down below, give the video a thumbs up, hit the bell notification, and I think that's it. There's so many things to say at the beginning. So I don't know that I'm thinking about now making this part of a rambling librarian thing, but I don't know if that it's necessarily a librarian point of view, but I think some of it is influenced by my job a little bit. So I don't know what I'll call it, but it's, how to listen to audiobooks. Now, right off the bat, this is not going to be one here where I discuss, whether or not audiobooks should count as reading. If you don't want to, then don't count it, as well as if you're coming here to say, audiobooks aren't reading and you're just lazy, peace out, just don't even bother. That's not the point of this video, and I don't need your judgment here, and I don't need you judging other readers, because that's why we have people that don't read, or are afraid to read, or don't like talking about books. So get out of here if that's your attitude. So this is something that I've seen actually pop up in quite a few book groups that I'm in, but it's also really interesting to me that in the last, I've only graduated professionally from grad school and been a librarian professionally for a little over 2 years. But in the last, not even I don't even know if 10 years, there's been a massive surge in the use of audiobooks. Now, it could be for a variety of reasons. The majority of people that I know that do read use audiobooks for a variety of reasons, but one of them being that people who graduate that are generally my age now have, I feel like this is somehow going to have someone come in here and start bitching about millennials, but millennials now are graduating university, or even if they don't go to university, they have far more debt, they make far less money, they're doing far more things. A lot of the times they graduate, they have a professional job, and then they have to get another minimum wage job along the side just to get themselves together with student loans, cost of living being through the roof, cost of food, really depends where you are, if you've got a spouse to share your stuff with, if you've got kids on top of that. So I know people that just for hands down, they do not have the time to sit down and read a physical book, or if they do, it's maybe 20 pages at a time. But know what they do have? 2 to 3 hour to 4 hour sometimes long commutes, whether that's on transit, whether that's sitting in traffic, where they're not doing anything, but they can't be sitting physically and reading a book. So that's one of the things. People don't listen to audiobooks because they're lazy. Some people may do it. I don't know. The majority of the people that I know do it because they have to multitask. That's just the joys of living in 2018 and wanting to be able to both be sheltered and eat. And that generally requires a bare minimum one full-time job, if not more. I feel like I'm very easily going to get deterred off course thing here, but I also know tons of moms that listens to audiobooks just when the kids are napping because they need to just... Girl, I don't have kids, I have 2 dogs and they're a little much for me sometimes. So I can imagine you just need to space out and zone out. Alright? I get it. Do you. Don't let someone judge you into not doing that. Do whatever you gotta do to zen yourself while kids are napping. There's also the fact that audiobooks add a lot to books a lot of the times. Let's take, for example, the Illuminae Files series by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This book, I guarantee you, if I had read it without ever having touched the audiobook beforehand, would have been very thrown off. I'm someone who's pretty open, but it's an odd book format. It's government redacted documents, kind of like word clouds, text messages, there's so many different voices. It's difficult to read something like this, and not everyone has the mind to start creating it in their brain or seeing it the way that it's supposed to be seen. This is a book series that you lose things from the books and the atmosphere if you don't listen to the audiobooks. The audiobooks have a full cast. They have the spaceship noise in the background. They have beeping. They have each cast member has their own distinct voice. It's very easy to separate them, which is really, really key in this book. There's so many different characters. They all do such different things, and they're all in very different parts of space. So it's very important that you understand different parts of this whole different cast. You also get an amazing idea of the AI system, Aiden. You also get this amazing understanding of the plague when it's on the spaceship that I've tried to read it without the audiobook and it doesn't give me the same impact. I don't appreciate it as much, and not that I don't like it, I just don't get it as much. Okay, so this is a book series that without the audiobooks, I honestly don't know that really anyone would argue with me on this. It's just not as good. It's not bad. It's just not as good. The audio just adds so much to this book series. Then let's talk about the fact that we have audiobooks narrated by the author. You cannot tell me that getting to listen to Amy Poehler or Lauren Graham or Tina Fey or, I'm trying to think of who else I have nonfiction books for. Audiobooks narrated by the author give so much context, especially Anna Kendrick, that's who I was thinking of. Not only just like giving them context, it helps you understand better sense of humor a lot of the time, where they're coming from. I'm someone too that there are words in English that you spell them the same, but they mean different things depending on the tense of the sentence or how you're using them. So sometimes you'll have to read the sentence a couple extra times, whereas if the audiobook, I'm listening, I'm reading along to the audiobook, and she is telling me, Amy Poehler, about this whole story. Okay? Like, this just adds so much to it. I'm never going to get to meet Amy Poehler in my lifetime, but I can listen to her telling me all these funny stories about how she wrote the book, about Parks and Recreation, about Lauren Graham telling me about Gilmore Girls. That book, it's not big, but talking as fast as I can, whatever the long subtitle is, I cried listening to that book. Hearing Lorelai Gilmore telling me all about Gilmore Girls, that's a part of my childhood. That's something that added this things to this book that wouldn't have been there if I had just read it in my own voice in my head. Then we have things like Children of Blood and Bone, or really any book now in YA. It's getting there's lots of multiculturalism, but as well as if it's fantasy, people make up tons of words that I don't know how to pronounce, whether that's the made-up Elvish? What's the Lord of the Rings language? That language? Or if it's a Nigerian word or name that I have never heard of in my life, living in a very white community in northern Canada. I can listen to the audiobook and hear it pronounced properly. I expand my vocabulary, I expand my understanding of different languages a lot of the times, as well as it helps me get a better understanding sometimes of how letters work. I mean, the AELF mashed together is not something that I know really half the time how to pronounce in English, but that's something that's very common in a lot of Scandinavian languages and all that stuff. I don't know how to pronounce that stuff normally. Listening to books like Children of Blood and Bone on audio, instead of me just going, so-and-so said, I actually hear who is talking and their name properly. Audiobooks narrated by famous people are also a great way to get reluctant readers to start listening. Books like, I know Harry Potter, for example, has been narrated by Jim Dale, who is pretty well known. They've just done the Quidditch games, Quidditch Through the Ages, which is narrated by a gentleman from The Walking Dead. I've never watched The Walking Dead, so I don't know his name off by heart. But that was really, really big news. His face was all over the freaking place, as if Harry Potter doesn't need any more promotion. There was also what's his name? I want to say Stephen Hawking or Stephen King, but it's not them. Who is it? Oh my god, this is going to bug me. I'll put his picture right here. I can't remember what his name is. I feel so bad. It's Stephen something, I think. I'm going to remember it in 20 minutes. But people who wouldn't necessarily read otherwise notice the celebrity name and go, oh, yeah, I'll give it a go. Because they know that name, and it gets reluctant readers reading and or listening. There's also been tons of research done to about the benefits of listening and also reading and all that kind of hoo-ha, but people still argue about all that stuff, but yeah. Now on to the how to read aspect. That's something that people seem to really struggle with, and I can understand, especially if it's not, you're just starting it all of a sudden, or maybe your family never used to do it. I know that it was something that was pretty natural for me. I remember even in grade 4, I listened to the Harry Potter cassette tapes. No, Harry Potter, the first book, in grade 4. It was a part of our treat from our teacher at the end of the day. We all read one chapter along with the audiobook, which was literally a cassette tape at that time. She put it in our boombox, and we had someone impersonating the voice of Hagrid reading us the Harry Potter books. That was mind-blowing to me. And grade 4 is, 10-ish years old. So, it's been kind of natural for me. If you're not paying attention, that's fine. It's something totally new and different for a lot of people. But, I'm not saying pay attention and crash your car, but just try and pay attention. If you're finding yourself drifting off, maybe it's not the right book for you. Which I guess will kind of lead me to some kind of tips and tricks. First off being, if it's the first time and you've tried it before and you've struggled, your mind tends to wander off, I'd pick a book that you've read before that you know that you like. The first audiobook, other than the Harry Potter ones, that I really remember listening to vividly, I'm sure it wasn't the first one, but vividly I remember it, is The Book Thief by Marcus Zuzak. It's one of my favorite standalone books it really is my favorite standalone book of all time. I loved getting to hear the voices of the characters, which I had just always imagined beforehand, and this was before the movie came out, so it just gave me a different way to imagine things. I knew where the book was going. I was excited. I knew that I was going to enjoy the book, so it was really pretty simple for me. Don't get discouraged by the size of audiobooks, but sometimes longer audiobooks, if you don't have the time to dedicate, a full day sometimes to the audiobook, just pick a shorter one to start with and work your way through there, because you have audiobooks that can be, 5 hours long, and then you have things like Outlander that are like 40-something hours sometimes. So if you can only listen, in 2-hour batches, then starting off with something like Outlander can be pretty daunting, as well as it's going to take you a long time to finish, so you can kind of start feeling pretty frustrated. So I would just suggest picking, a shorter book or book that you've read before and you'll like it. Also be aware that narrators can really heavily influence your enjoyment of a book. There are some narrators that I absolutely love, and there are some that have bored me to death, and then I've read the book on its own and I've loved the book. So it's just kind of like a different it's like an author. They have their own perspective, and some will have, they just do one single voice, and others will make up different voices. I've also noticed myself that I really enjoy narrators that have an accent other than Canadian and American. I'm basically always pro a book that is narrated by someone with an English, Irish, or Scottish accent. I just really enjoy them for whatever reason. Maybe it detaches me a little bit more from the world because I don't hear those accents where I live, or whatever, but I really enjoy them. And I think kind of the last thing I can think of for this video was, I've seen a lot of comments of like, should I count them towards my reading challenges? That's up to you. Your reading challenge should be for you. Don't try to do it to appease other people. I count them towards my reading goal. I also, however, tend to do a lot of joint reading. So I will listen to the audiobook for Illumine, but I'm reading along with most of it. For maybe 20 or 30 pages, I'm not, because I'm walking the dogs and listening, but I'm still reading while that's most of the other time in the book. And even those few books that I do read completely on audio, I still count them. I'm listening, I'm paying attention, I can tell you all about the books. I count that as a book that I've read, because I can tell you all about it and explain the characters, and I've reviewed it, I know the content within it, and yeah. And I thought kind of a fun way to close this would be to give a couple recommendations, keeping in mind that I read predominantly YA stuff, but I would really highly recommend the audiobook for The Book Thief by Marcus Zuzak. As I said, the Illuminate Files series is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic on audiobook. I would also really recommend any of the audiobooks with all the different narrations. I've listened to quite a few of them, of the Harry Potter series. They're really, really fun. And I remember using them, like I said, as a kid, because the size of the Harry Potter books when they were coming out and I was like, a preteen, were very daunting to me. So highly recommend that one. Coraline, I also remember vividly listening to Coraline by Neil Gaiman on audiobook as a kid, which still to this day don't understand why I love that book so much. I would also really highly recommend the audiobooks for Nevernight by Jay Kristoff, My Lady Jane by Cynthia Hand, Brody Ashton, and Jody Meadows. The Wolf by Wolf series by Ryan Groden is really, really wonderful on audiobook. I've listened to the first few books of the Ruined trilogy, Ruined and Avenged, or Ruined and Allied, by Amy Tintera. The A Court of Thorns and Roses series on audiobook is great, as well as the Throne of Glass series. The Girl from Everywhere by Heidi Heelig. Those are wonderful audiobooks. I've also listened to the first few audiobooks for the Spellslinger series by Sebastian de Castell. Oh, this list is getting very long very quickly. And the last one I can think of is the audiobook for Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. I really, really enjoyed those ones. Those are sticking out in my head. And I'll link all those down below to the Audible page. There's a couple different places you can get audiobooks. Check your library. A lot of libraries have physical audiobooks, as well as they'll have e-audiobooks, which are books that you can borrow through like Hoopla or Overdrive or Cloud Library, RB Digital. Depends on your library what they have. But there's also places like Audible's, the one that I use. Actually, there are very few audiobooks that I've looked there that aren't there and I've found elsewhere. A lot of the times I just get blocked by Canadian regional copyright. Sorry about that kind of word vomit on this topic. I'm just really, really interested in audiobooks. I really enjoy them, and don't let anyone guilt trip you into not reading them. You read however is helpful, and if you have a massive TBR and have very distracting or very active kids or dogs, or if you have multiple jobs and you don't have the chance to sit down like I was in grad school, do it. It's your peace and time. It's your quiet. It's your leisure, and enjoy it. Okay? Don't let someone guilt you into not and labeling it that it's not reading or whatever the heck the argument is nowadays. If there's any other part of this topic that you want me to kind of talk about, let me know in the comment section down below. I'll maybe make a second video if there's enough of them. I just kind of threw this all together. I tried to coordinate my thoughts a little bit better, but the sketch pad just went all over the place. It just was not working. So I figured I'd just wing it. Yeah, so let me know in the comment section down below if this is helpful, or if there's, like I said, other aspects of it that you want to know about. I'd be happy. I'd love to know, and I can, keep it in mind for future videos.